Well, I guess I should stand except that that's not happening. Nice person anyway. Okay. So this is how the day started for me. I put my cell phone on top of the car. Yeah, and then started to drive. And then I heard a thunk, so I pulled over, and by some miracle, it was still on top of the car. So I felt like that was a good sign for today. Because or else I would have been like, I'm sorry, I gotta get in this phone. Okay, so sorry, I'm going to try not to read too much because that's always boring. But so I'm Katie Baldwin. I'm a hybrid author, which means that I do small press and indie publishing. Let's see. Yes, that's right. And I am excited, so I wrote that one, I truly am, to be in a conversation with Tracy Livesey at Romance Salon, American Royalty for the Virginia Festival of the Book. And just so that you all know, Virginia Festival of the Book is a program of Virginia Humanities. It's a statewide organization whose mission is to connect people and ideas to explore the human experience. So, we have a bookseller on site, as you guys can see there in the back, and Tracy will be signing books after this. And we'd like to give a special thanks to the Jefferson-Madison Regional Library Central Branch. And we'd also like to thank Joseph and Robert Cornell Memorial Foundation. Your support is also welcome. Many festival events are free of charge, but not free to produce. Your support helps. You can text to give by texting Virginia Book, lowercase, all in one word, or to 56651, or there's a QR code right to the right side of Tracy there, and that will send you to the paying space. We also, I think I've already said that. And now, Tracy Livesey. So let me give you a short and exciting bio. Tracy Livesey's latest release, American Royalty, is a dangerously sexy rom-com that evokes the real-life romance between Prince Harry and Duchess Meghan Markle, and is one of the most buzzed-about books of 2022. She's the 2021 Emma Award winner for Best Interracial Romance for Like Lovers Do. You have that book right there. And which was also named one of the 100 Best Fiction Books of 2020 by Kirkus Review, in addition to being named to USA Today's list of 100 Black novelists you should read. She's been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, Entertainment Weekly, and CBS This Morning. A former criminal defense attorney, so watch out. Tracy lives in Virginia with her husband, who she met on the very first day of law school. And there are 3 children here at UVA, yeah. So please welcome Tracy. I'm just going to give a small plug as to how we met. We actually met at a Virginia Festival of the Book several years ago with our fellow author Mary Berry, and they both encouraged me to join Virginia Romance Writers. So if any of you are here because you're interested in writing, I do suggest working with Virginia Romance Writers or RWA, because they are a great place to start that conversation and figure out where you want to go. You know, anything from, I want to be an indie publisher maybe, or I want an agent. However you want to do it, there are people that will talk you through what your choices are, and they can be a very supportive group, don't you think? I mean, especially Virginia Romance Writers, we really enjoy that. So anyway, so now we're just going to have kind of a conversation about writing before we get into the nuts and bolts of American Royalty. I wanted to ask a few questions, so I'm going to sit now. And so how did you get started in your romance writing, and which authors influenced you?
So I was a big reader growing up. My earliest memory is of my dad reading to me sort of every night before bed. And so I don't remember a time where I didn't love books. I found romance probably a little earlier than I should have, about 11 or 12. I found Harlequins, and my life would never be the same. I devoured those books. And it just never occurred to me that that was something that I could do, that could be a career, especially with my parents saying, that is not a career. you need to, go to college and pick something else, which is what I did. And so I came to UVA, which I loved. I was here for undergrad and graduate school. Met my husband, practiced for some years. We got married, we had children, and as life happens, things happen. I ended up staying home with our 3 young kids, which was great, and it was exactly the decision I should have made. But after a while, I was like, it's time for me to find Tracy again, and mommy can sort of, she's still here, but I've got to find Tracy. And I talked to my husband and was very clear that I loved being an attorney. I was happy to go back to that. But I had found romance novels again while I was home with my kids. And at that time, there were more resources, the computer, internet were things now. And it allowed me to reach out to other people and find out that there were organizations that could help me. And it just, something in me was like, this is your time to try, right? Like, we've been living on just one income for a while. We could do it a little while longer. So I talked to my husband, and he agreed. He was very supportive, and that's what I did. As soon as my youngest was in preschool, I started, and I haven't looked back. One of the best decisions I've ever made. Extremely, I love what I do, so I'm really happy about it. In terms of authors that influenced my writing path, when I was reading, because it has been a while since I found romance, there was sort of like one path to do it. And so I would say authors like Nora Roberts and Jane Ann Krantz were my inspiration of what I wanted my career to be. So I thought I would start out writing smaller category Harlequin type romances, and then after a while I'd move on to single title books. And so that is how I thought I saw my career going. That's what I wanted to do. In terms of authors I read that inspired me, it would be definitely, Nora, but also Sandra Kidd, Brenda Jackson, especially because those were romances that featured women that looked like me. And I was like, oh, that's possible? I can do that too? So that was sort of a game changer for me.
Wow, I get that. And I remember you saying one time in one of our conversations that you also really liked Linda Howard, and that you kind of were hoping that your name could be right next to hers.
Yes, because my maiden last name was Howard, so I would imagine be Linda Howard in the bookstore and then Tracy Howard, like as you do.
You do dream about those
Yeah,
things
you
for
do.
sure. So, did you find that you had any pitfalls at the beginning? Because you said you had this idea of going from the category to single title, and did you do that, or was it different than you imagined?
I did it, but not in that same way. So the pitfalls for me didn't come from becoming published. It was that in my head I thought my career was going to go a certain way, and it didn't. I think all the sort of pitfalls for me happened after I got published. I am sort of one of those fortunate people, and fortunate in sort of the Oprah sense of preparation meeting opportunity. So, I did my research, I joined writing organizations, I met people. Those things prepared me so that when I had the opportunity to pitch to, my first agent, she picked up my work. And in the same way as when we submitted to the first publisher, there were several who were interested. So in that way, I was fortunate that I didn't get a lot of rejection in the beginning parts of the process. But once I was published, it was learning about the business. And it was at a time when the romance genre industry was changing so fast. I mean, I'd gone to it thinking that was going to be my career path, and in the process of just getting my first book published, suddenly we were talking about digital publishing, we were talking about smaller publishers, and it was changing the industry, and you're as a new person trying to learn it while the industry is trying to learn it. So the pitfalls came from just navigating everything that was happening more so than getting into the industry.
Yeah, I mean, for me, for example, I had an agent almost right away, and then I ended up having to let her go because she didn't do anything. So the truth is, just if your goal is to get an agent, that's not, just don't let that be your ultimate goal, because you will be so disappointed when things don't work out, you know. So there are a lot of pitfalls at different times of the career.
It is. I felt like wanting to be published, like you're at the bottom of this, you know, mountain, and you see the summit, and to you the summit is getting published, and you get up to, you're like, whew, I made it to the top. And then you get there and you realize, oh, there was like cloud cover, and it was covering like this whole other part of the mountain that I did not see. That's the part that you spend the rest of your career trying to get to. That's what getting published felt like. And I don't mean to sound discouraging, because it's so wonderful, but again, it was one of those things that I just wasn't prepared for. I literally remember the first day my first book was published, and I walked into Walmart. Was going to be different, right? That people were like, oh, there's Tracy Livesey, she just published a book. And like everyone was just shopping, buying their groceries, nobody was paying me any attention. It's like, oh, yeah, like that's just sort of one step. You've got to keep going, you've got to keep moving. And there's just things you don't think about when you're just trying to, you know, to get published, to get your first book out, to get your story out.
I think one of the first things that whenever people say, ooh, you're a published author to me, I'm like, it's not like Castle. I just want to make that really clear. Nobody has a penthouse apartment in New York with a fireplace always on. I mean, you know, nobody has that. But also there are pressures that even, you know, as I talk to friends like Adriana Anders, you know, she was worried about her pre-sales. Things that, you know, and her publisher was really getting on her that the pre-sales weren't big enough. And you think about these little things, so you take that one step, and you're like, yes, I'm here. And now you have to climb another part of the mountain. It's just always, and again, just like Tracy said, I'm not complaining at all. It's just, it's not wine and roses. But if you really love the work, it's worth it. I mean, so that's kind of good.
I guess I'm older, so for me it wasn't like thinking it was going to be like Castle. I thought it was going to be like Jessica Fletcher and Murder, She Wrote. That's my favorite show. So I thought, you know, I was going to be traveling, and I would go to my editor's office, and there, you know, we would do edits in person, and we would have these lunches, and I would solve a few murders along the way. But that is not what happened.
I think I'd almost prefer that, because that's, you know, I would absolutely solve a crime in a small town. So now let's talk sort of how you get your stories done. So when you begin a story, are you do you outline? And I'm going to explain things. That do you do a beat sheet? And just so that you know, there are different kinds of writers. There's something called a pantser, and a pantser is someone who writes by the seat of their pants. So literally they sit down and just and I admire those people. But I'm kind of in between. I'm the pantser who has made an outline, who has made a bio and has a beat sheet, which is basically romancing the beat is you follow these specific points of the story and you make sure to include them because it helps with pacing, and it also just helps with the genre, making sure that you're following the genre to a certain extent, or else your readers will let you know. So what I'm asking is, are you a pantser? Do you do a beat sheet? And what steps do you take before you actually settle down to the art of writing?
I truly believe that sort of why I was able to be fortunate early, why, you know, I sort of got the first agent I pitched and sold the first book I wrote is because of the research and the work that I put in before attempting to even pitch an agent or, you know, or submit a book. And I know that that comes from my career as an attorney, being prepared before I stepped into the courtroom because I loved trial work. And that sort of has rubbed off onto writing. I don't like throwing away work. So pantsing doesn't work for me because a lot of those authors they like to explore. And so they may write 10,000 words and then not use it. But to them that's worth it because it gets them where they want to go. If I'm writing 10,000 words, those words are gonna be used somewhere in something. Like I can't, the thought of it, oh God, I can't even imagine. So that said, I am a plotter. I do a lot of work before I sit down to write. And it took me a while to even think about that time as work. I might be able to write a book in 4 to 5 months. It would be hectic, but I could do it. But that's the writing. And what I was not doing was counting the 2 months of just mental work that I had to do before I could even get to writing. And it took a while for that to count as work, but I have to do it. It's one of the things I've learned about my process is I need to think about my characters, who they are. I need to do a beat sheet. I need to do a character sheet, and not a character sheet like what is his favorite color or what does she watch on TV. Although those things are important, but what is their internal angst? What do they have to overcome to be together? Like those are really sort of important things that I have to sit and think about. And how does that weave into plot? Because the best books, the plot mirrors the internal arc. Like all of that has to weave together in a seamless way. And if we do our job well, you don't notice that. You're just reading a book and you're entertained, but it all makes sense to you. When we don't do our job well is when you're like, this doesn't feel right. I don't know why it doesn't feel right, but it doesn't. And so I do a lot of work to make sure it feels right, so that you just read it and you enjoy it and you get it and you put it down, and hopefully you like, I like that Tracy Livesey. What's her next book? I want to read it. So I do a lot of work before I sit down to write.
Yeah, this isn't in my sheet, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So I have this weird thing where sometimes an image comes to mind. Like I just finished a short story where I saw my punk rock character standing on top of a house. Because, it's not, she bought the house. But the point is, I didn't know any of that. I just saw her on top of the house. And that was the first thing that I sort of connected with before I started all of the other work before writing. Do you have is it music or is there an image that comes to mind first? What's that first scene that makes you go, ooh, oh, I can tell this is going to be something?
I don't know if I have those things. I had it for the first book that I wrote. I had this image of this woman sitting outside of a man's office, like waiting to talk to him. And I was just like, oh, who is she? Why? What's going on? But after that, every book I've written in some way or another has come off of another book. And so they're not, there's not like a random image. So in other words, like after the first book, I knew the second book was going to feature characters from the first book. So now I'm going into it thinking about characters more so than I am about scenes or plots or things like that. So yeah, I don't think that's happened since the first one.
Oh, that's cool. So how has writing for you and basically for everyone changed in the past few years, especially for an author of color? Do you feel that the writing publishing world has changed?
Yes, it has changed, and I think it's changed for the better for authors of color in terms of getting a foot in the door. For a long time, there was this idea that if they had an author of color, well, we have our one, so we're good, and there's more than 5 of us out there, so you've got to let us in. And then there was an idea that there wasn't an audience for books by authors of color. I think that has changed. They are still trying to find a way to market books by authors of color. And I just, we write romance. So if you love romance, the audience is there, right? I trust the audience. Sell them our romance. Sell them, not that this is, a book about or written by a black woman or about a black woman, which it is. I mean, you can see that on the cover, but that it's a royal romance and it's going to be fun and exciting and sexy. Like, sell that part of the story, and the audience is there. Romance readers love reading romances, and so in that way, just opening the door and allowing authors of color to tell their stories, I think they're getting better at.
Yeah, that's good, because I remember several years ago, someone on Twitter, which can be kind of, cesspool, but saying something like, I just can't connect to a story about black people. And then Miss Bev wrote, so you can read a book about vampires? And I thought, see, and I retweeted that several times because I thought that's exactly the thing. You can look, what, two vampires falling in love? Oh, no, with the black. It just doesn't. I think once she pointed it out in the most amazing way, in my opinion. So, okay, so,
do you think that maybe having people of color in your advertising, has that changed at all? Do you think that would help authors of color?
There have been studies that show that having people of color on books does affect sales, and not in a positive way, unfortunately. But it's important to me because I remember being that teenager who picked up these books and loved them and was perfectly happy reading books that didn't feature people that looked like me. But the joy to see one where someone did look like me was, insane. And so it's important to me that, since those are the stories I write, that those people be on the cover of the books. And I trust that romance readers will, if they enjoy the story that I'm telling, will pick up the book and read it and be able to connect with the characters. Yeah.
I have two questions. One is, do you think young African American girls would better be able to know about you and to read you if there was more information saying it was about an African American story with American characters? It seems like that, to me, that would be great for them.
Right. Yes, I think, and that's why it's important, like I said, to have, black women on the cover of my books, is for that reader who loves the genre and is looking for stories where the heroine looks, like her. Like, that's extremely important. And I think, in a lot of ways, there's so much division in our country. And I think publishers are trying to find a way to appeal to everyone. And sometimes their thoughts on how to appeal to everyone is how to appeal to everyone white. And so what we're trying to do is just be like, appeal to romance readers. That's what I want you to do. Appeal to, I'm not going to convert someone who doesn't like romance, because a lot of people have their thoughts about what we write. So I'm probably not going to be able to convince you to pick up a romance. But if you love romance, I would love to be able to convince you to pick up my book, because I am an old school romance reader, and that's what I write.
Yeah. Well, that was my second question. I'm sorry I haven't read any of the books, but I will. I am a diehard romance. I read romance. I've been in a book club for 20 years, and they kick other books, so I'm forced to read those other books. But they haven't converted me. But I feel like I can't pick romance, even though I get to pick, because none of them really like romance.
You gotta pick it. Make them read it.
Well, my question is, because I haven't read any of the books yet, is I like a happy ending.
Yes, because that is what romance.
Yes.
Romance is a happy ending.
No
And
matter
if it-
what they go through in
Yes.
between.
And that's why we write the best. That's why it's the best genre, right? Because you know that at the end of the book, these two people are going to be together. So until that point, I can take you on rides. I can rip your heart out. I can make you cry, laugh. You keep you reading. Don't you throwing the book against the wall. But I can like evoke all of those emotions, right? Because you know at the end, I'm going to deliver you safely with these two people in love together. That's
That
the
you fall in
beauty.
love with.
Yeah, and you fall in love. That's the beauty of our genre. You know, that's why I think it's the best. It's the best genre. It really is. And you can tackle issues. Like there's so many subgenres of romance. Like whatever you're interested in. You like sci-fi? We got you. You like paranormal? We got you. You like mystery, suspense? All of that we have within the romance genre. And we give you a happily ever after. And what kills me is when people talk about the happily ever after, well, we know how it's going to end. Yes, but it's a journey, right? Like, do you not read a mystery? Mysteries, you know how they're going to end. You're going to find out who did it. You still read it, right? Right, you still read it. So romance is exactly the same. I think it's because it's, it's women and it's emotion and that stuff, and people get all up in their feelings about it, but it's still the best.
I agree. So now we're going to talk about the book. Okay, so I will say this, that I kind of inhaled this book and may have to reread it because it was one of those books where I was on my Kindle and I like, one more chapter or whatever. So I want to talk about the influence of how you created Danny, Duchess. And just, I know that some of it's based on Meghan Markle, but probably, or not Meghan Markle, no, Beyonce, right? Isn't it?
No, well, no, it's a lot.
Oh, yeah, well,
Yeah.
you talk and I shut up. That's how this is.
So the idea for this book, it's marketed as Harry and Meghan, and I'm not going to say that at a certain point that wasn't a part of it. I think their romance, it was a shortcut, right? Because before them, because I've been thinking about writing a royal romance for a while, but the response I always got was, I don't know, is that really, realistic? Sort of that was what I was getting. And I think what Harry and Meghan did was cut that off because it has happened. And so it grounded the story in a world that they could see. So that's, the power or the influence of Harry and Meghan. But the story, the idea for the story of a rapper and a royal came from this picture. It was a photo shoot that Cardi B had done for Harper's Bazaar, and she had dressed up as these different fairy tales, and in one of them she was Cinderella, so she's running from a castle. She's wearing this, Vera Wang ball gown. Her Jimmy Choo was sort of like off to the side, and it was just this stunning picture. And someone on Twitter sent it around and said, where's my rapper Prince romance? And I was like, ooh, I don't know, where is it? That's a great idea. And so that's where the idea of that hat started. My characters in the past have always been probably more like me. They're Black women who are professional, who are just thinking about their career. They have no time for love, and that's of course when they fall in love. And a lot of people, I had in my mind a certain idea of what a female rapper was. And so that is not the type of heroine that I normally write. And so for a while I struggled with what type of rapper was she going to be? Was she going to be, more like a Lauryn Hill or Queen Latifah, or more like, a Cardi B or Megan Thee Stallion? And as I did my character work that I talked about and thought about what her issues were going to be, what her internal arc needed to be, I knew the type of rapper she had to be. And while that initially made me a little uncomfortable, because again, that's not, I didn't have the best understanding of writing that character, and I didn't want to fall into stereotypes. I wanted to be true to the story I saw in my mind and the journey I wanted to take these characters on. And so once I accepted that, it was like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I see where the story is going to go. And she is my favorite heroine. Nick, who's in Like Lovers Do, I've always said was my favorite, but Danny, Duchess, is now my favorite. And since I've written the second book about her, I feel like I know her so much better. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm getting less Lauryn Hill and Queen Latifah from Danny.
No.
It's
definitely not.
I think we're both from the same generation where that would have been my comfort zone too, to write more of that character than Megan Thee Stallion.
Yes.
When it's like, oh, I'm smiling. Oh my God. I don't know how to handle her. But yeah, I get it. So I read that Prince Harry influenced your character for Jameson. What, aside from the obvious that he's a redheaded hot guy, made you focus on him, or what influenced you at all for this character?
I mean, again, it's the same thing. It wasn't so much Harry, it was the idea of this character who grew up in this world and who had to have been indoctrinated from such a young age to look at things a certain way or to do his duty, how that character found the strength to step away, or not step away, how he found the strength to go after what he wanted, even if everyone else was saying, this is not the right person for you. This should not be the right person for you. I think that's the part from Harry that influenced Jameson. And I almost think it was like by osmosis, because again, I wasn't looking at Harry as a direct influence, but I'm a person who grew up watching Princess Diana's wedding and all of the stuff that happened, and her passing. I was in my second year of law school, or getting ready to start it when she passed. I remember that moment, finding out about it, and I remember, like everyone else, probably having this not natural fascination with her kids and watching them grow up, and remembering when William suddenly got handsome and was going to school. I was like, oh my gosh, and then seeing Harry, like, I was that person. And so I think maybe some of the things that I took in was just because it was already kind of in me, just from following them throughout the years. Doing the research to write this book, I learned so much more.
It does seem rather horrifying what they have to do, the royals. I guess for me, I've never had that much of a fascination, although this sounds terrible, but I was at a bar when Princess died. It was the TV, and I just went, what's happening? And so despite the fact that I've never really had an interest in the royals, she was always really classy, and she seemed to really struggle with things and be able to have that stiff upper lip despite. So I admired her, but the whole idea of the royals, I was never one of those, I want to be a princess. Oh, no, I don't. I don't want to deal with all that. That sounds like a nightmare to me. But I know that is a huge thing. So do you feel like maybe your sort of fascination with it kind of helped make this come true for you, this story that you kind of already knew a little bit about Diana and all that, so you had kind of a bit of a background?
Absolutely. Like if I didn't have an interest in them as a family, I wouldn't have had the idea to write the book. So being interested in them definitely played a part, and it made the research fun for the most part. So that really did help. And I was a person who was like, oh, I would love to be a princess. I watched, all the, like I said, my dad read to me all the time. So I, was fans of fairy tales and Disney stories and, and all of that. And watched all the movies and, Princess Diaries and Princess Bride and, everything. Watched it all. And so there was also a part of me that was like, and now I get to write this story, for me, for girls who look like me. We get to, be princesses too.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the thing that I love the most about this book because, I write rock star romances and other things, but that's what I thought. What I loved about this was it had that rock star element because, of her, but then it also had the fairy tale element. So, you have kind of everything. And if you're a romance reader, there's nothing more exciting than knowing that you're walking into sort of a fairy tale with a little bit of your candy, which happens to be Rockstar for me. So, I was like, yep, that's for me, and you said and it's going to be out soon, right? The second book?
Yes.
Okay. So, what are we thinking? Are we going to write another one, or what are we going, what's happening after that?
We'll see. So the idea for American Royalty was more like it was going to be a series. So it was the picture that I saw, but also when I watched Harry and Meghan's wedding, because I did, live, and I remember watching all of the people coming to the wedding, and it was a mixture of royalty and then like actresses and actors, and you saw I called them American royalty, and these two worlds merged. And that was the idea that I had. This notion that we don't have prince and princesses in that way, but we have celebrity, and they act as if they are royalty, and they only sort of they only hang out with each other, right? They only date each other, and it just seemed like its own sort of small world. And so the idea initially was that I was going to write this series that was going to be about American royalty, and the first book was going to be a rapper who actually ended up marrying real royalty, and then the second book was going to be another sort of celebrity couple, and so on and so forth. But what happened is I was halfway through writing this book, and their lives were so large. Usually I try to get my characters together on the same page pretty early in a book, but there was so much setup that had to happen before you realistically believe that these two people were going to be together, and I was just like, there's too much. Like, I don't feel that I can believably give you their entire story in one book. And so I emailed my editor and I said, I think that the second book has to be a continuation of their story. And she was like, well, okay, we'll write it and then we'll see. And I was thinking to myself, if I write it, that's what it's going to be. Because I don't write extra words. I don't write extra words. Right, so that's where we're going. I'm taking this as okay. So I knew that was going to happen. The book is still a romance, so at the end of this book, they are together. But the thing that I usually do, I didn't do as much in this book, because it's really important to me that when you close one of my books, you believe that those characters are going to be together forever, that I've either shown you that they've worked on what their issue is, and that I've shown you that if they haven't addressed everything, you believe that they will. Like, these two people are in it for the long haul. And I didn't do that as much in this book because there was so much other stuff. He's a prince, she's a rapper, their lives are huge, it's all taking place in front of the media. It's a lot. And so just getting them to the point where they are willing to be together took one whole book. So I knew that getting them to deal with the issues down, that was going to be an entirely separate book. It was one of the hardest books I've written because I've never done that before. Each book has been a new couple. I've never, explored the same couple in a second book. But it was wonderful. and I love them, and I would love to write another one. I did not end that book in this way, but there is a way there can be a third book. There was also, there were other characters, romances that I set up in the first book when I thought that there would be, books with different couples. I continue those stories in the second book, so it is possible that if, this book does well, that a third book could either be Danny or Jameson or one of the other couples. And I would love to continue writing that. I do. And so, so she's talking about, this is the Duchess Effect, and this one comes out July 11th. Yes, and our bookseller is going to pre-order, so.
I love that cover, so beautiful.
Yes.
I have another question,
Oh,
sorry.
well,
Don't you think that in order for us to believe the book, you have to believe the story and the characters and something in your background, like you mentioned the princesses, you were always the princess. Somehow that connects with you in order to give that to us?
I think it helps me when I can connect to something that I'm writing. You feel it, I hope, in the stories that I write. It's why I do so much research before I write books, and why at least the last five books I've written, seven books I've written have some personal tie to me. And I think that's what I've found, is that my better ideas come from something within me that sparks an idea that makes me write, versus someone giving me a story idea or just picking something. But again, if I do my job well, that comes through in the story.
Yeah, I have people come up to me and say, I have a great story for you, and that never, I'm just going to tell you right now, that never is going to be something I write. I write what I want to read. That's, and I'm sure that's, and when you read Tracy's books, what I like is that it's if you like classic romance, this is the author that you want. There's a modern twist to it, or there are cell phones. It's not old Nora Roberts from the 80s. You know what I mean? But it is. You're still getting all of that yummy stuff that you loved from classic romances from back in the day. It's just updated, and so I couldn't recommend you enough. I remember reading. I think it was your first book when you were with Entangled back in the day, and so and that was Virginia when we first met too. Such a good time.
What was the name of the book?
It's the Tycoon Socialite Bride.
Yes.
Because that was my version of like a Harlequin.
Okay. Yeah. Those were good. Yeah. Sorry about that. I have them in my book. And I even looked at them. I was like, I wonder if I should remember these titles. Because you know how it is. If you're me, I read so many books that I can reread a book the next year and go, this seems familiar. And I've read half of it before I realized
I ordered them online second or third time.
And that happens too now, especially like with older books, when authors are getting their rights back and they might put a new cover on, and you're like, oh, that sounds great. And then you're still like, wait a minute. I've read this one.
I know. I did it with Elisa Claypot because it was a completely different cover. And then I went, wait a minute. I know this book. So now, it's great because a lot of you have asked questions anyway, and I thought I was going to have to entice you, but I do not have to. That's great. I have two of my books that I'm going to give out to people if they ask questions, which obviously you're going to get one because you know it's questions. And I just want to mention that this one does have domestic violence at the beginning. You don't see it, but there's the result of. But I will say that she gets hers at
That's
the end.
good, they should.
She does get hers at the end, because happily ever after, right? When you mentioned that, I get a lot of good reviews for this, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm writing a second book because the end of the book was they just got together at the end. They had so much stuff to deal with. So I'm writing a second one for the same reason. So I was like, yeah, that's crazy. And I've never thought about writing a second book with the same characters. So it's kind of crazy, but I do love them. So yeah, it should be fun. So any questions? Yes.
Okay, so my question is, I've been fascinated with the royal family, just like you, watched the weddings, I didn't watch the funeral, it was my first thing I didn't watch. But I was wondering if you think the fact that we now have a royal couple, that is an interracial couple, that is going to help the sales of your book, or hurt the sales? Because here we've already heard from someone who's not all that interested in the royal family, and would that be, possibly a turn-on?
Yeah.
So, what do you think?
You know, I thought it would help. I did. You know, they are so divisive, I guess, and people either love them or hate them. And in the same way that I thought that it would help the sales of my book, I think what it does is people, especially because of how it's marketed, that if people hate the idea of Harry and Meghan, then they just won't pick up the book. But if people love the idea, then I think it helps them to pick up the story. And again, what I try to, the marketing is the marketing, and I know, they want to get the book in front of as many people, and as they can. And so I lean into it too. But I'm also very clear, like there are some books or romances that were sort of like thinly veiled stories of Will and Kate. Like, this is not Harry and Meghan, like a beat by beat of their story. It's only sort of the idea of what would happen if you took an American entertainer and dropped her into the British royal family. That sounds a lot like it. I know it does, but it's like, I spent all this time saying it's not the same. Okay. Marketing knew what they were doing. Okay.
There are elements, but I think also, like for me, because I'm not as interested in the royal family, but I'm a fan of your writing and also a fan of romance, so it's not going to stop me necessarily from reading it unless it's that blatant. If I'm reading a book that's clearly not Harry and Meghan, but really is, I feel like I know enough about them. I don't need to read another story. But if it's been inspired by, that's a different thing. I will definitely pick that up.
Yeah.
So.
What interested me in the title was that it was biracial, and and how would you, as an author, explain to someone who's reading what that kind of relationship would be like in today circumstance and context?
Right.
Not so much that it's Harry and
Right.
or that issue itself.
Yes.
What's that like, and what does that bring to the table?
Right. One of the sort of choices I made early on, before my first book came out, was that my stories were going to be interracial, because I am in an interracial marriage. My husband and I have been married, it'll be 24 years next month, together 27 years. So, and when we were dating, it was very difficult to find our relationship in this genre. And if I did, then the entire conflict revolved around race. And that was not, our issue. He's a man. So we had, those were our issues, we had those issues. And so I was looking to find stories that featured interracial couples, but where it was a romance. And so the problems were the problems you found in romance novels. And, again, I sort of made a decision. I said, this is what I'm going to write, because, again, I want to write for those people who may have been in a similar situation and are looking to find themselves in the genre that they love to read. All of my books feature interracial characters. all of them have discussions about what it means to be, you know, a black woman or a white man in society, and how that is going to affect their relationship. But the conflict is never, I'm black, you're white, we can't be together because we are so different. That is never going to be a conflict in one of my books. There are people who write those stories, and if that's what you're looking for, if that was the experience you had, or if that's something you want to see how they grapple with, then those books are there, and they are for you, and you go read them. But when you pick up a Tracy Livesey book, it's going to be these two people, they meet, they think each other's hot, they got issues, they work them out, they end up together.
You do sneak in some stuff though.
I do. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's the world, right? And so
You do sneak in some of the conflict that comes from
Yes.
being a black woman in a white woman's world.
yes.
And it's subtle and, I mean, you look at it and go, "Ooh, crap." It's happened too. Okay.
Yes, I do, because that's true to the experience.
Get your microphone.
Oh, thank you. That's true to the experience. So that is important. But again, those things don't affect
Right.
her relationship with him, and vice versa.
I believe you said earlier that you had 3 children,
Yes.
and I'm curious whether they know about what you do, how they feel about it, how does the world react to it?
I am not famous enough that they are worried about how the world reacts to them, unfortunately. My youngest, in his mind, I am. I am that famous. But so for a long time, I did not let them read my books. I didn't want them to read my books. And I remember when my daughter turned 12, because that was the age that I found her. And I would say the same thing about finding them at 12 years old and too young. And I was just like, you know, especially because I don't write closed bedroom door scenes. They are spicy, my books. So I'm just like, I don't know. They are, so my kids are 19, 17, and 16. So my 19-year-old has no interest, you know, and he should. He's at Virginia Tech. He's studying engineering. I don't want him to even think about me. Just do your work. That's what he should be thinking about. The other two are, you know, in high school. They have friends who may, you know, or on Instagram and TikTok now, and they may see the cover. They've asked, and you know, they are aware. My daughter is reading one of them. She is very is enjoying it. She has not gotten to a scene yet, so I don't know how I'm going to deal with that. But the main thing that they take away from it is that Mom, this is what Mom does. She enjoys it. They like when they see videos of other people talking about my books. They get a thrill out of that. You know, that's just sort of where we are. I don't think that they have met any sort of negative judgment about what I do, if anyone's saying anything negative about, you know, what Mom does. So that's the rock star.
But that's really cool, you know, that she's starting to read. I would be, you know, my parents were like, so we're never reading your books. I was like, that's the best choice.
My mom will not read my books because of the sex. She will not read my book. Now, this is a woman that loves romance. I had the extreme fortune and pleasure of being able to sign at Nora Roberts' store in Maryland. And my mom is a huge Nora Roberts fan. And so when I told her, she was so excited. Not because I got the opportunity, but because I was signing with Nora Roberts. And she came, and Nora was so sweet, and she took a picture with my mom and signed like all of my mom's stuff. And she was just giddy the entire time. She's sitting behind me as I'm signing. Is she looking at me? No, she's over here looking at Nora, just, you know, loves romance. She says she cannot read my books because of the sex. She tells everybody, that I write them. She's always asking, you know, I told this person, and can you sign a plate? And I said, you know, all of that, but she won't read it. She was with me in the delivery room. She won't read the books because of the sex scene. I'm like, Mom. Apparently, that's what it is. So I get that. Yeah, she's not reading it.
Yeah, I'm not reading it.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where if I'm writing the scene, I don't want to think, what will my dad think? I don't want to do that. So I got to be free to just write what I'm writing.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah, I don't think about them, but you know, it'd be nice. She likes the genre. It'd be nice for her to read, but I'm not going to force it.
Right.
It's
Yeah,
fine.
I think that, I get it, but as long as she's promoting you,
Yes, that's
the
important.
part.
Yeah.
that was
I
it.
have another question. I have an 18-year-old granddaughter,
Mhm.
she's biracial, and my grandson is too, and he doesn't read anything. The wrong line.
Right.
But my granddaughter is not a reader either, and I want to try to see if I could encourage her to read one of your books.
Mhm.
She watches stuff on TV all the time, so the sex stuff wouldn't bother her. Even though she's never had sex, the sex stuff does not bother her. And maybe that would be the goal of getting her to read it, I don't know. But how would you encourage me to encourage her to read this? Because unfortunately for them, they are raised in a white family. So they don't even see themselves as black. They see themselves as more like me. So, but, you know, we've had discussions on and off, but it's really hard for them to identify with African Americans, which they need to do because that's how they visually are. You know what I mean?
I understand.
So how would you help me encourage her to read this book, or at least to start it, because it has characters like her?
Right. I would, teenagers, what I've learned, don't always listen to what we tell them, but they'll listen to what other young people tell them. So if, you know, she's on TikTok, I would like search my name, the hashtag my name, or the title of the books, and then there will be a whole bunch of videos, not a whole lot, I'm not like that level, but there will be some videos there of people talking about why they enjoyed the book and why it's a good, you know, book to read and fun. And then that might convince her more than you saying, I went to this festival and this lady was there talking about books.
Sitting around and she would see it. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. That could be good too. But yeah, that's what I would do. I would like put it there and then like, you know, send her a video from someone young saying, oh, this is a fun book, and then that might be what it would take. Yeah. And then tell her to go, you can also read the acknowledgments, because one of the things I say in the acknowledgments is I talk about why, I write the books that I write. And one of the things I say is so that kids, like my kids who are biracial, can see loving depictions of their parents, or people who look like their parents, you know, being together. So.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, we are at time, so does anybody have any other questions for Tracy? Well, thank you so much for joining us.